you want to refresh your plate, but we're going to get started. My name is Rachel Elrom, and I am the TOPS Programs Communications Specialist.
And I'm Jessica Hartle. I'm the Lead Information Officer with Food for Peace at USAID.
And we're very excited that you are joining us today for our workshop on photography. Can everyone on the phone using Adobe Connect hear us? Okay.
We have about 7 people online.
Wonderful. Yes, and we are, I believe, recording this as well. So lots of opportunities to listen after the fact if you want to refresh any of the tips that we share with you today. And we'll also give you a handout on the way out with a handful of the tips. But we would like to get started. Here's our agenda for the day. We're going to just talk for a few minutes and then go over why photography is so important for what we do, as well as give you some tips on some optimum tips for using your cameras out in the field whenever you just have your phone handy or a personal camera, because oftentimes we don't travel with professional photographers. That's kind of a luxury for us. So we wanted to give you some tips on if you just have your phone or your personal camera, you can still take wonderful, useful photos for whatever it is that you need for your project. And then we'll get a little bit of time to practice those tips, come together, discuss about it, and give you some more tips on how to, once you get those photos and you download them onto your computer, how you can edit them a little bit if for some reason you find that they're still not quite perfect as you want them to be. And then we'll have some time for some wrap-up and Q&A and discussion on any questions you might have. So we just wanted to start out by getting a sense from all of you. Not everybody has to answer, but if you want to introduce yourself and give us a good idea of what it is that you're using photography for, what's going on in the field, in your projects, in your companies, what made you want to come and learn more about photography. Anybody want to share? Yeah.
My name is Andrew Herrera, and I'm the Executive Director of Share Americas Global. And we use photography to share our story, but also to collect qualitative data through videos as well. So I'm here to learn best practices, mostly in getting permission. I'm interested in that,
Okay.
how to do that in a respectful manner.
Yep.
Wonderful. We'll go over that a little bit.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Around the board here. I'm
Sure.
working out associate, kind of like the managing editor of the website for the company, more or less. But so I'm always on the hunt for good images to sort of show the work we're doing.
Great.
So I'm kind of curious to know now, where we're in with like DC, how do you kind of communicate with people in the field to give them the best of their abilities?
Okay. That is an important topic, because I'm guessing that you're relying on a lot of your field staff to send back photos of the wonderful work that they're doing. Fantastic. Anyone else want to? Yeah.
Sure, I'll continue. My name is Joan Steiner. I'm also Staff Associate Communications for International Economic Growth Division. And I just was curious just for tips to share to the other people in their division, because they're the ones who usually go out and do the site visits. And some of the pictures that have come back have been really awful. They're like, this is really expensive. I'm like, can I use any of this?
Yeah.
So kind of tips for them, especially with their iPhones or the prevalent camera that they use.
Okay. Wonderful. Anyone might want to share?
Yes.
Sorry, this is Adrienne Tadella,
Hi, everyone.
Knowledge Management Coordinator with TOPS.
So one that they need great photography, great work with children and
Work with children and families at St.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing.
All right, so should we get to it? Yeah.
So should we get to,
So I'm going to turn it over. I can hear myself.
so I'm going to turn it over.
So we'll turn it over to Jessica.
So as you all may know from some of the new platforms that USAID is using to tell our story, photography is becoming an ever more important part of that. We're using new platforms like new for USAID platforms such as Exposure, Medium, and a few other storytelling platforms to really get across what it is that we do as an agency, and of course part and parcel of that is photography. and getting good images from our staff in the field or from us communications staff who travel out to the field occasionally. So it's becoming a big part of what we do on a day-to-day basis. And, I think it's so important because, and this is particularly true for audiences here in the U.S., if you don't have a face to put with the story, it's a lot harder for people to relate to what we're actually doing on a day-to-day basis in our programs. So this little boy, we have used this photo so many times because people are so captivated by this image and just the smile on his face and what he tells about himself. So this is a photo from inside Syria from one of our partners. So I think putting that face to the project is so important in trying to tell our story as an agency and for you all, of course, as partners as well. So we, of course, in the day and age of social media with Instagram, photos really are what we're using to tell our story versus super long text. So you remember something like this, telling a story with a woman who is showing off her goat and figuring out ways to tell that story in just one photo, I think is really what we're hoping to try to evolve in our communications as an agency. So as the quote says along the bottom, how many words would you take to describe what's actually happening in this photo? And you'll see some other photos throughout the course of the session, and hopefully you all will take some photos in our little session where we'll snap pictures of each other. So why do people take bad pictures? This is from a colleague of mine, and I left it in there because I thought it was a pretty hilarious photo. Sometimes events like this, you're required to take the photos because it's a big event that you're hosting. Maybe you're launching a project and the ambassador is speaking, or you have someone going out to the field and you're obligated to take photos of that chief of party or whoever it is. But there are ways that you can do that in a more compelling manner. The other thing I would say about this is, why do people take bad pictures? You may just not have tips on how to take good pictures. So please, Rachel said we're recording this. Please share this far and wide with your colleagues in an effort to try to help improve everyone's photography skills. So this is one example of a bad photo. We'll give you tips on how you might want to improve this, but the dog is dead center in the photo. That's just not what you want to do. It's not compelling at all. And it really doesn't tell a story at all. Same thing for this one. The boy is also dead center, and then you have all the stuff in the background that's distracting you from what the actual subject of the photo is. This one, the gentleman is in the center of the photo. It's not too bad, but you got the chairs in the background as a distraction. His face is a little bit dark. If you flip to the next one, his face looks a lot better. The chairs are gone. It's a much more compelling photo because you can actually see the features on his face as opposed to the previous one where his face is all dark. So what makes a great photo? I really like this one. This is actually from a strawberry project in Palestine, I believe, West Bank, Gaza. And I just think it's so compelling because of the gentleman's expression on his face. You can see the strawberries that he's growing. So something that's just simple, direct, something that everyone can relate to. The colors of the strawberries are nice for your eyes to capture instead of something that's flat and monochrome. And it's really focused in on him and his strawberry crops. So it helps to tell the story of what he's doing as a strawberry farmer. This woman also, doesn't need necessarily a caption. This woman is actually using mobile phone technology in her store now in order to get, so it's actually a Food for Peace program, doing food vouchers by mobile phones. And so she's one of the first vendors that we chose to do this project. So little things like this. The queen actually moved a chair. One of my colleagues gave me this photo because you're not going to get the exact right setup you want when you're going out to a site visit or you're going to take a picture of an event. Everything's not going to be perfectly set up, so move the furniture. Make sure you get the setup that you want to make the most compelling photo. And Rachel will get a little bit more into this in the actual tips that we're going to go through. So some of the things that we look for, making the connection with the subject of your photo. If they're way at the back of the photo and they're not, front and center, then you're really not making the connection with that individual as part of the story that you're trying to tell. As I mentioned on the previous one, making sure you actually set up your space so that it actually does tell that compelling story. And don't be afraid to ask people for what you want when you're actually going out and taking photos of them. And making sure they're actually paying attention to you. I don't know how many of you, and we just had this at my Thanksgiving dinner, where 4 people are taking camera shots on their phones, and people are looking at one person who's taking photos, and then there's 3 other people taking photos, so all of their photos, everyone's looking this way. So you're not actually capturing them looking directly at the camera. So make sure that the people you're taking pictures of are looking at the camera. And just look for different angles. Don't just take a photo direct on. Look for different angles, and Rachel will get into that in some of the tips. So I'll leave it at that because some of these Rachel will get into a little bit more. But the last thing, shooting for publications and webs, we also love to put photos on our website as well as in publications that we do. A couple of things. Make sure if you're taking pictures of people, you want the person to be front and center. Like that picture of the little boy, he was the star of the photo. And you may want the contextual pictures. That's another thing I have up here. But if you're taking pictures of people, really make sure that they're front and center and then they're the star of what you're trying to shoot. Take a variety of photos because you're not only trying to tell the story for your projects of the people, but of also the impact of the project's work. So if you're building infrastructure, or if you're rehabilitating agricultural land, or building a water pump, for example, you may want some establishing shots of those in order to be able to tell that full story of what you're doing. And then shooting close up, so there may be some details you want to take pictures of. The handle of a water pump, or little details like that that help tell your story. So don't be afraid to take a gajillion shots of everything around you, because I think you'll find amongst your 1,000 shots that you may take those key photos that help tell the story, and some of it may be those really close-up detail shots. And then, making sure you're taking pictures of the environment. Where do these people live? You may want to take pictures of their houses. You may want to take pictures of the village where they're living, or the environment around you. Some people are living in the desert, and some people we work with are living in rainforest-type environments, so that helps to tell your story as well. So make sure to include those shots as well. So now I will turn it over to Rachel, and she's going to get 10 specific tips that we can use for taking good photos.
Thanks, Jessica. So I'm going to go over these 10 tips that we've pulled together on how you can make best use of your cameras and take wonderful, useful photos. I also we put this on a handout as well, so an abbreviated list of the tips, so we'll hand that out at the end of the workshop, so you have that to take with you. So the first thing is know your camera. Take a few minutes before you would go on TDY or out into the field to get to know the features of your own specific camera, so that way when a moment presents itself to take a wonderful photo, you already know how to set it up, and you don't have to fiddle around on your camera and waste some precious time. So some things that you want to know is like the ISO, which is the sensitivity to light of the camera, or the f-stops, which is the shutter speed. All of these things, these presets, the flash, give you different options for how much light, how much detail the camera is going to capture with the photograph, and this is where the professionals end up taking more interesting photos, because they can capture different shades of the light and different colors and whatnot.
Yeah. I would also say if you're just using your iPhone or other type of phone, make sure you know all the functionality on here as well. There are some pretty cool functions that they've done on cell phone cameras these days.
Yeah, and wonderful filters and things they've added as well, including through some of the photography apps. Some of those apps also have additional filters that can help you, and those might be really attractive. One other thing to consider is a tripod. If you know that you're going to be taking a lot of photos, especially at an event like a conference or a speech or a lecture or whatnot, think about bringing an actual tripod, and you can get tripods even for your phones as well. And one thing that Jessica so kindly reminded me to mention was make sure that all the pieces are together when you bring the tripod with you, so that you don't have to fiddle around and it works really well.
Yeah, I actually had a tripod last week videotaping something, and there is no mount to attach the camera to the tripod. It was missing from the bag, so
not helpful. So 2, compose with care. Think about what it is that you're actually taking your picture of. Rather than just shooting randomly out into the open space, look for focus. Think about what's actually going to be in the frame of the photo. Do you want to capture a person who is doing a specific activity or action? Focus on that particular person rather than, as Jessica showed, one of the examples of bad photography, getting all the background noise that might distract from your photo. Another part of composing with care is use natural frames. If you have, for example, like one of these, farmers, you're framing the farmer at the top right in the field, showing what it is that they do. This picture lets you know that this person is a farmer and working in the field. There's no reason to have to guess that. So using those natural frames and the context will help tell a more compelling story about what's going on in the photo. Thank you. Crop out extra elements and fill the frame. This is, again, focusing really right exactly on what it is that you want to take the photograph on, clearing all out, the extra unneeded elements. Go vertical. So often we're used to taking horizontal photos, but look at how much more interesting some of these photographs are just because they're in the vertical. Had we maybe taken this middle photograph in a horizontal way, we might not have gotten her full dress, or over here to the left, we might not have gotten the tops of the trees. So we can get more detail in just by switching it to a vertical photograph. So play with a wide-angle perspective. So I'm not entirely sure if some of these were shot in panorama, but it sort of looks like it could be. But either way, play with the angle. See if you can't get more. Maybe turn the camera down a little bit or up a little bit to the side. See if you can't capture more of the landscape in an interesting angle rather than just, dead on. Get closer and then get even closer. So see how close this photograph is to the boy who's drinking this water. Well, it's quite possible that you don't want to actually walk up that close to the person and get in their space. However, you can zoom in with your camera. So again, the whole purpose is to fill the frame and really focus in on the subject of the photograph rather than having any background noise in the photograph. So change your perspective. So we're going to go over a couple different ways on how you can actually look at the image a little bit differently, at the subject a little bit differently when you take the photograph, so that way you might get a more interesting angle, a more interesting photo out of it. We'll go over these at the bottom here. So stork. Go from a high angle. See how this woman in the left photo is standing on a table and taking a picture down of her colleagues. That way she can get all of their smiling faces looking up at her rather than just the fronts of them and having to stagger them. It's a little bit more interesting than just, dead on in front. The Hail Mary. So literally, standing on your toes with your camera and shooting everything that you can from all the way up top. It's just another interesting way to get something from a different angle. the paparazzi. So, going from different little, hidden corners, how paparazzi like to hide and catch things that you might not have seen with the naked eye, hide in those little corners, go from different angles, look for something that might be unique that isn't quite so dead on. And the weasel, get down on the ground with your subjects. This photograph was taken right in front of this baby. It brings a little bit more warmth and a little bit more life, and it gives a little bit greater focus to that subject rather than looking down on it and having your perspective almost be, imposing on that figure. It gives a little bit more power to whomever you're taking the photograph of. So 4, work the light. Dusk and dawn are wonderful times to take photographs outside. You have this beautiful natural light. You don't have to worry about the sun shining into your camera or playing weird shadows on the ground. It's beautiful. It's soft light. Soft light makes for beautiful photos. So 30 minutes before and after sunrise, 30 minutes before to after sunset is a really wonderful time to capture these images.
I would say also, some of us don't have a choice of what time of day we take photos. So look for natural things like trees that could help you, placing your subject under a tree rather than in the noonday sun. You're better able to capture their features on their face. So look for objects in your environment that can help you break that harsh sunlight. I think is something that I've tried to do when I'm taking photos in the field, because I have no control over my schedule when I go out. I'm usually accompanying a colleague. They're the ones that are the focus doing the monitoring of the programs, and I'm taking pictures on the side. So I just have to work with what I'm given, and so that's where I try to use things like trees or shade from buildings, those kinds of things, to be better able to capture people's faces.
Good luck being allowed to stay out past curfew to enjoy golden hour.
Yes, that is very important with some countries, indeed, yes. I had to deal with that with a videography crew the other day.
So apply the rule of thirds. So this is a really neat little trick, and obviously something you have to kind of eyeball as you're doing it with your camera, unless your camera for some reason has that feature, but I have not seen that yet. So this way you can divide it into actually blocks of 9. And as you can see in this lower right-hand frame, there are these 4 little corners that emerge when you divide it up into blocks of 9. And look at how these photos are then centered off to the left or off to the top or off to the right. It's a little bit more interesting than just a dead-on center of the photo shot. So the point is to not just play with the angle at which you take the photograph, but also where that subject is centered in the frame. But as you can see, the focus is still on the subject with these. Likewise, you can also divide the, divide the frame into 3 and move the horizon around. See, to the left, the horizon is a little bit lower on the screen than, rather than being straight in the middle. And this way, you get that beautiful sun, and had the horizon been straight in the middle of the photograph, you might have only gotten, a lot of water, which might not be as interesting as, the beautiful sun.
And the same for this one too.
Yeah,
opposite.
So it's, the horizon's a little bit higher. You capture more of the wheat and the workers in the field rather than just random sky and clouds. So you might actually, see you can capture more of the subject in the photo rather than just having that horizon in the middle. So use a plain background. See how the background of these photos are really monochromatic, and you don't really see them very easily. Look at how wonderfully these subjects pop. You really see them. You can actually almost see their personalities and the feelings in their faces. That's because you're focused squarely on them, and having that plain background will help you focus on people. 7, use flash outdoors. So this is actually the most interesting one as we were putting together that I really never thought of. When you're outside, even though you have that natural light, sometimes there's still shadows. Sometimes it, just still doesn't really work well. So turn on your flash, but turn it, if you can, set it to a little bit of a lower setting. Don't put on a big bright flash, but turn it down a little bit. That little bit of extra light, you can see there's more brightness in her face. There's more features that you can see. It'll make for a more beautiful photo. 8, shoot a lot. So oftentimes, we go, okay, here is a group of beneficiaries. Maybe they're farming. Maybe they're, getting some sort of anthropometric measurement. Oh, I just took 1 or 2 photos. That'll be enough. Take 10. Take 20. Take a whole bunch, because oftentimes you'll catch a little thing in a photo that you weren't necessarily thinking you were going to catch. And as you're going back through your photos later on, you'll find that magic gem that just happened to show up. You catch a random moment that you might not have set up to catch. So plus it gives you a whole lot of variety. If you're snapping a lot of things and going back later and looking through them, you're less likely to miss something. You're more likely to have different options to work with, or even make a collage if you have that much space to do that with.
And I would say this is so much easier now that you have digital. My very first trip overseas for USAID, I had a film camera still. I literally took 8 rolls of film. And I've used maybe 20 of those photos, but with the digital, I'm able to take 500, 600 photos in one trip, and it's so much easier to then be able to pull out those gems of the photos out of that 600 pictures that I've taken. So
yeah, absolutely. So after you've taken a gazillion photos, then edit them down. Throw away the ones that you just know are not going to work. It's not worth, having a library full of photos that you have to search through, most of which are not going to be useful to you. So just delete the ones that just don't work or that you don't think you'll ever use. Part of that, is, so we had the example of showing only 7 photos. 7 photos is a good number to show a compelling story if you're doing a photo story as opposed to a large text story with a photo as a complement. If these photos are compelling, for example, you can see a little bit of what this town is like, or what this marina is like just from these 7 photos and what life might be like here. You might be able to guess that it's a bit of a sleepy town or people are vacationing or whatnot from this photo story. So it's not an exact number, maybe 3, maybe 9 or whatnot, but if you have, a bunch of wonderful, great, sharp, attractive photos, those can go a long way with telling a story. The other thing, too, is that if you're going to do some sort of like collage of photos rather than just one photo, odd numbers tend to be a little bit more attractive to people than even numbers for some odd reason. I just got that. So that was not intentional. So odd numbers tend to be more attractive. So, use 3 or 5 or 7 rather than 4 or 6 or 8. And last one, and probably the most important, be the director. If you know that you want to get photos of your beneficiaries or photos of a warehouse or photos of a farm, go out and take them and ask people to do the activities that you want them to do. So for example, I was in the West Bank taking photos of programs that this project had implemented and grants that they had given. And I was a total novice at this, and it was my first time in the field, and I was taking photographs of this machinery that we had given a grant for. And I got back, I didn't ask them to, I didn't ask any of the beneficiaries to come out and be near the machinery or use it. And I got back all the way, we were all the way up north in the West Bank, got back to Ramallah, and I was like, oh my God, none of these photos are usable. And I had to ask my colleagues when they went back out to visit to take more photos. And had I just asked, hey, would you mind coming out to the machinery and standing with it or show me how to use it while I take your photo, we would have saved that headache and I would have had a beautiful photo right off the bat. So ask and you shall hopefully receive. So these are our 10 photo tips, and like I said, we'll give you a handout on your way out with some of these. Any questions before we move forward? Anybody from online or, yeah?
I actually have a comment
Yeah.
that I want to share more than a question because most of the photos I see are really powerful. Some of them, the places of the subject are a little bit dark.
Sure.
And one of my experience, one of my tips is how to carry a big sector. It is very cheap, it's like $10, $15, and you can pull it, and it's very mobile, and you can diffuse it, and really enhance the face of the subject. And I think in development, it's really important to empower the subject and make sure the face is entirely. So that's my,
And that's really lightweight too, so it's easy to stuff into your bag.
yeah.
Yeah.
So where do you tend to put the, I mean, usually the reflectors go like right in front of, do you put it just right in front of you on the ground?
Yeah, you can use like a chair if you're by yourself, or you can have somebody hold it a little bit. And even like if you're taking photo on a cloudy day, it's really easy to just play with somebody. It's
Wonderful.
very, very mobile.
Thank you for that tip. Really appreciate that. Wonderful. Any other? Yeah.
Good question. How do you guys handle the subject of release of giving people permission, like on a piece of paper? Is there a standard you employ for all the time, or is the language very different so forth? It's a little more like verbal.
So for USAID, it depends on the country. A lot of countries, it's just verbal permission. There are some countries where they do require written permission. So when I was in Zimbabwe last year, we did have a release form that the beneficiary had to sign. It was in the local language so that they were able to read it. And that was a country, fortunately, where literacy is pretty high, so the woman was able to read the form as well. And I think part of that, too, is just explaining why you're taking the photo. She was a little nervous about signing the form and why do you need to take my picture. And once we explained the purpose of taking the photo and we were trying to tell the story and, you know, hers is a compelling one, it's so that the American public can better understand what's going on with Zimbabweans and how we're trying to help. I think she got a little bit more comfortable with me actually taking the photos. So I think taking that time to actually explain to the person as well. But check with the USAID mission in the respective country you're traveling to, and they'll be able to guide you. Because I traveled to about 10 different countries before I finally got to a country where they required a release form. So.
Sorry, I feel like that's something that we encounter a lot as well, and we've developed our own releases and translated them into multiple languages.
That is fine too, yeah.
If USAID has a standard, like a list of, this country, just for ease.
Yeah.
We're taking pictures of the USAID program. These are the requirements that you have.
Right.
Because it varies from country to country.
That's a good point. I'll ask if our Public Affairs Bureau has something like that. I don't know if they do, but it would be worth polling the different missions, since we have a communications person in pretty much every USAID mission, so we can ask about that.
A standard release that you need, then that's really useful for us as well to know. I mean, we have our lawyer look at it, but
Yeah.
If there's a standard that you need, then we can obviously comply with it. We just need to know what's up with it.
Yeah, I can ask about that, and then we can follow up with folks since you all registered. We have your email addresses. We can follow up with everything. The other thing I would say related to permissions, I was working with a couple of our partners who work inside Syria, so it's an incredibly sensitive environment. So what we basically came to the conclusion for photos is never showing a person's face because they didn't want to put any people at risk. And the other thing is that USAID does have the ability, when we're using these photos on our website, we can pull all the metadata out of a photo, so it won't have the GPS location or anything like that attached to the photo if someone downloads it from the website. So that's another kind of security measure that we have put in place. I just found out about that because I was dealing with these issues for partners working inside Syria. So there are ways that we can get around that if you're working in particularly sensitive contexts. So just ask us if you have a communications counterpart that you work with regularly at USAID. You can ask about that. And I literally just learned about the fact that we can pull out the metadata a couple weeks ago. So there are tricks for you getting around some of these sensitive issues so that we can still tell our story. Sorry,
not ask, but I just wanted to clarify for the people on the phone that we were talking about getting photo permissions and, what to do with, when you're in country, what sort of requirements there are per country. We also got the request to see if USAID has a list of countries along with what type of permission, whether it's just verbal or written permission is needed, that we can share with the implementing partners. I also want to add a couple things to that. First, I want to add that remember that if they're taking photos of children, that their parents need to give you permission to have that released. I will say that on top, technically, our consortium lead is Save the Children, so there's photos of children all the time. I will say that I am absolutely reluctant to use a photo of a child on any of the TOPS materials because I don't know if that child, it's like if I'm not sure what the photo permissions are. So just be careful of that little, item that you have that permission from the parents. The other thing I wanted to mention too is that when you actually take the photos, how you portray the person in the photo in the material that you use is extremely important. For example, I worked on a project where a material was created for HIV treatment, and it had on the cover of it a photo of a mother breastfeeding a child, and the implication was that that mother had HIV. And I don't know how this happened, but it turned out that it got all the way back to that woman's village, and she did not have HIV, and it was a big to-do, and then it got all the way back up to like the USAID mission director, who then called the CEO of the company I worked for, and it was like all hell broke loose, but kind of rightfully so, because we want to make sure that we're portraying what's actually happening in the field rather than just using a random photo to represent anything that we like. Yeah.
Maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm under the impression that we're also trying to not show the most pathetic cases, but the more hopeful ones.
Sure.
That really, I was at a conference recently, and that really, really old breastfeeding photo with the healthy boy being breastfed and the starving little girl being bottle fed. They showed it like dozens of times at the session, and we're like, I think we don't do that anymore. Am I wrong, or?
I think it depends on what you're doing. I mean, I don't know that you necessarily want to show the most pathetic cases in, a promotional material or in a report or whatnot. But, there are training materials. Yeah, there are training materials I've seen, for example, on malnutrition, where there is a photo of a child who is extremely underweight and, very bony with the protruded stomach and whatnot. You have to show that sometimes for medical reasons, so it's not a blanket.
Right, but I think in the past people used them for sort of to solicit funds and to elicit guilt and and kind of those kind of feelings. But they found that it doesn't actually work that well, but actually it is more powerful than despair.
And you want to be careful too that we're not exploiting people. So that's another aspect of it. Another little, tip to add on that I didn't learn until I got to TOPS, which I thought was very interesting, is that if you're especially taking photos of people who are darker, like, specifically within Africa or whatnot, they're very self-conscious that their features, are kind of hidden because their skin is so dark and the photos tend to be dark. So just be very careful that there's plenty of light. You want to make sure the features, if you are taking photographs of people, and you are showing their features and whatnot, make sure that those features are visible in the photograph. Maybe add a little extra light or lighten the photograph a little bit, which we can talk about a little bit later. Yeah.
I appreciate your example about the woman, and you got the back to her, and for us, as a best practice, we automatically engage that person one-on-one from the very beginning, so we're taking a photo out of respect, just to say, we're going to have a photo of you, is that okay?
Yeah.
Because we're friends, we're people, and so, I don't want random people taking photos of me on the street, and so I would do the same thing. And then we also videotape verbal, just as a backup, saying, do you get this? Do you agree with this? And then there's no question if the kid or the mother or anybody had that on record, so just have a best practice for the field.
Great.
And it's part of that mutual respect thing.
Great. Did they hear? Can you repeat? Absolutely. So the suggestion we had a little conversation about whether or not to use, happy, hopeful photos versus photos of people who are sick and starving and whatnot, and that hope tends to be more powerful than illness. And we also got the suggestion to perhaps even, of course, ask somebody if you can take their photo before you take it, and also to even maybe get a little bit of video confirmation that yes, it's okay to take that. You know, our phones often have video recorder cameras now too. So wonderful. Anything else on the? No question. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So I have a question about how you balance between basically asking people permission and also making sure that they're comfortable and candid in a photo. I don't think you should ask them to pose, but do you like ask them a question for them to do a certain action to make sure that the story comes through in the photo?
Yeah, so I was just in Jordan about a month, well, not just, a month and a half ago, and I was interviewing a family as well as taking photos. So what we did in order to get those more candid shots was my counterpart with the World Food Program engaged the family in conversation, was making jokes with them so that they were smiling and laughing so that I could take photos of them in a more candid way rather than them posing for me. So that was one way we did that. So I used her expertise, and since she was translating for me anyway, so she was able to do that. And also trying to get people, I generally try not to get people to pose for me unless I'm just doing a portrait of one person. But our work makes it easy because we do a lot of agricultural projects or infrastructure projects. So you can get pictures of people doing work in the agricultural fields or whatever it is. So just think about that when you're doing that. It may be harder in certain contexts to do that depending on the type of project that you have. But I think always getting people in action is much better than the portraits. And don't be afraid to ask for that, because often we are standing in someone's field with them talking. But if you can actually get them to maybe kneel down and show you some of the plants that they're working with and have them engage maybe with the partner's technical staff or something like that. We have a really nice shot our partner took in, I think it was Malawi, where the farmer is working with the technical expert and they're crouched down by some of the farmer's plants, and it's a really nice composure of the photo. Any other questions?
Any other questions? Okay, so we're going to get a little bit of practice in with these tips that we just gave you. So why don't we take maybe 5 to 7 minutes, introduce yourself to your neighbor, maybe practice taking a photo of your neighbor, go out into the hallway, there's wonderful glass doors and views of outside. Pick up your phone and try some of these tips. Maybe take it from a different angle than you normally would have, rather than straight on, or use the rule of thirds to have that interesting focus in the corner, use a white background, whatever you want to give it a try, and maybe think about the process that you went to take that photo rather than just snapping it, and we'll come back afterwards and discuss and get some feedback on how that worked for you. So,
and if it would be helpful, we can give you the tip sheets as well, since they're on the PowerPoint, and so that you have these to look at so you can practice some of these yourself.
Yeah. Are we going to talk about writing a narrative around the photos too?
We had not specifically. We can talk about it
a little bit.
So we're going to get back together. For those on the phone, we're going to just report out a little bit on our experiences. So those of you on the phone as well, feel free to type in your experiences if you were able to take a few photos.
I saw some really awesome people going out in the hallway and outside and getting close up to flowers and ornaments and all that. So how did that feel? How did that work for you guys? What do you think? How'd your photos turn out? You want to share what they went for? What did you look for when you're going out and taking photos of whatever you took a photo of?
That's the best tip from
Jessica.
I'm just thinking of the last name. About using the HDR function on my phone. It really is making a huge difference. You get to take 2 photos in 2 different light settings at the same time. Yeah, it's next to the flash.
Yeah, I don't know, because I haven't looked on functions on my other phone.
I have a Google phone and I have it on
Okay, well there you go.
So for people on the phone, the suggestion was to use the HDR setting, if you have it on your phone, to to take photos in a couple different light sources at the same time?
Other thoughts?
Other thoughts? What did you guys take photos of? Yeah.
So I took a photo of the raindrops on a leaf,
Very cool.
and I've kind of just started to experiment with photography, and I was told once, like, you need to, when you're taking a photo, you need to think about, like, what you find the most compelling about what you're trying to capture, and just be sure that your photo is communicating that to someone that's coming in blind. So I was kind of, like, taking it up kind of farther away at first, and then I realized, like, what's cool about the drops on the leaf are, like, how big they are, right? So, like, I got up closer, and you can, like, kind of feel the raindrops and, like, see how, I don't know, round they are. You can get that, like, perspective a little bit more.
Wonderful. So do you feel like the photo that you wanted to take was the photo that you actually ended up taking?
Yeah, eventually, but whether or not that's something like my project would be, like, we like people, not raindrops, but...
Right. But I mean, like, when you aim to take the photo just now.
Yeah.
Cool. Anyone else want to share their experiences with what they took? Anyone online want to share? Not yet?
Not
Go
yet.
ahead.
I find that if you really, sometimes you have to take photos of things that may not be particularly interesting. Like, sometimes we take pictures of our stock rooms when we want to show people how well organized they are and stuff like that. And so really putting thought into that's what we talked about in terms of, like, perspective and what angle you're going for and how exactly you can capture this image in a way that it at least looks interesting. For example, I went up there and took a picture of a bunch of hangers that were on the coat rack. And from the perspective that I took it from, it's at least more interesting than if I would have taken it like that on.
Great.
And the other thing is when you're taking your pictures, take your picture, take a step forward, take another picture, take another step forward, and take another picture. So that you are forcing yourself to get that close look. Even if you think standing here you've got what you want, you never do. You'll find that second and third step gets you what you thought you had in the first shot.
Yeah, and I think that is particularly important with if you're only using your phone for photos, because even if you're zooming in, it's not necessarily going to be as clear of an image. So don't be afraid to get closer to your subject if you're just using your phone.
Or just rely on cropping.
That too,
yeah.
yeah.
Get the picture you want in the frame.
Yeah.
Yeah, to add to that thought, whenever you have a smartphone, you zoom in on it, you're actually reducing the size of the photos that you can produce in the pen.
Good.
On most smartphones, I think 98% of them, whenever you zoom in, you're just degrading the quality that you're going to get back from it. So I always tell people to zoom with your feet.
That's a good expression. Zoom with your feet. Good idea. Any other thoughts?
Yeah.
So I was trying to think of a story that I want to capture, that I want to convey through my photo. And when I was saying that you were taking photo of her, I was trying to capture the moment right away. I feel like that's the life for the moment. I mean, to feel like it's more important to capture the right moment and the right time when the story is being completed.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not always going to have the luxury of being able to set up a shot. So, yeah, snapping those photos and taking a lot of them so you can hopefully get one or two amongst that group of photos that's capturing whatever's going on right at that moment is a good idea, yeah. Any other thoughts? Someone just sent us a photo from their...
Do you know where the photo was taken? I'm sorry?
Parenting session in Rwanda, I believe it says.
Okay, so parenting, this is a photo from one of our online participants who wanted us to do, asked us a favor to do a little vetting of the photo from a feeding session? Parenting session in Rwanda. So, you want to do it or you want me to do it?
Or do you want to ask
let's
both here?
absolutely.
What do you think of this photo?
Love it.
Why?
You've got this one among many thing. You've got this really compelling little kid, but then you have all this context in the background that really gives you a sense of where you are.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful with the colors. The exposure looks pretty good.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I like how they broke it up with like the grass and the trees. I know that's probably just with the shot, but a lot of times when people try to focus in on one person but still have lots of others in the background, it gets too muddy. There's too much going on. So you can't really, that your attention doesn't come to the forefront to that one person you're trying to focus on. So the fact that it's broken up, yeah, with more monotone color and stuff, I think helps.
Okay.
It's nice that it's a little off center, right? She's not square in the middle of the picture.
Yep. Yep.
I like that they didn't have her the mother's eyes shown, so it kind of frames the photo that you really are drawn to the child's face and are confused by the close-up of the mother. You see her smile, but it's not as
Prominent,
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I actually have a question relating to that. Like, is it okay? Is it good when you're actually cutting the mother's eyes like that? I know that if you adjust the angle a little bit, the story would be different.
Right.
It would be more about the mom and the baby. I don't know if there's like anything about cutting people's face.
Yeah. So there was a question for the folks on the line. There was a question about what's the standard practice with cutting people's faces off like this photo has, and I would say I think in this particular photo it really frames. You're using a natural surrounding, this woman's body, as a frame for the child. So I don't see any problem with this. I, for a long time, always thought, oh, you have to have the whole person in there. And, just barely like the edge of their arm. But I think this one, it really nicely frames the baby. And so I don't see a problem with that. I think also too, this is something that I was taught in a videography class, like using that to show perspective as well is fine as well. So, yeah.
I was going to say, I really like the smile included, just because you can tell she's looking at her very lovingly. Like, you can tell there's a connection there without having the mom even looking.
Yeah. And this is one of the best shots I've seen of a training. I don't know how many people have seen photos of trying to take a picture of people in a circle at a training, and it's so difficult to capture that in something that's compelling. It just ends up looking like a really boring photo otherwise. But with the child in the photo and then the curve of people around the child, I think that makes a much more compelling photo than if you had stood farther away and managed to get everyone in the crowd in the photo.
Right. I wonder what this would have looked like if you had that reflector to brighten up the child's face. But the features are nicely, they look pretty good.
Yeah.
A little more bright.
Yeah.
Do y'all have any tips for improving it or editing or anything that you would say would be improved?
I think maybe if you had the people in the background less in focus, so that it was more of a color palette in the background, that might be a different perspective on the photo, so that it was just the baby and the mother in focus and the background was more. So that's playing with your depth of field with your camera. I think, sorry.
Maybe even going a little bit lower too, just trying to put the people in the background and put the baby in front. And then even talk about editing, like even people on their phones, there's little, most phones have a software where you can brighten the picture a little bit. And make it a little scan a little bit more.
Yes, and brighten it and white balance it a little bit, especially the girl is wearing a white dress.
Yep.
So it's kind of, I think white balance is good.
Okay, yeah, white balance would be a good idea. Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that it depends on what the intent was in taking the photograph. So if your intent is to capture the group, then I think it's really great to show the different people, the different participants in the group. If your aim was more to capture the baby, then maybe tightening it up just a little bit, and again, like Jessica suggested, kind of blurring out the background with the depth of field would put more focus on the baby. So it depends what you're going for. Any comments on everybody's quiet or really quiet?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Oh, actually, Susan just commented. She said, wow, I was trying to show pride of mother, how large group was, and that is in natural setting in the hills. So that was the intent.
Wonderful.
Great.
I think that we get to, like, I really liked your comment earlier about it tells a different story if you don't crop the mom out versus you do crop the mom out. I think that we get fixated fixated on these ideas that there being rules and there's a right and a wrong way to take a photo.
Yeah.
And it's really more about the story that you're trying to tell and your intent, what you're saying. What are you trying to show? What is the most interesting thing about this photo? There's so many things happening in this space that are really interesting, and it's what's the story that you're telling?
Yeah.
And you're making a choice, and it doesn't mean that, like, oh, like, because you use a different ISO, well, that's wrong for outdoors or whatever.
Right.
You know, it's about
the story.
Adjusting the levers at your disposal and the tools that you have to tell the kind of story you're trying to tell.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah.
And I think if you like one of the first slides in the presentation that's about like who and the context, like all of those different variables that you're trying to capture with how I initially interpreted that was with many different photos, like a series of them. But with a photo like this, you could probably capture many of those aspects. Like, I know where this is. I can make a guess as to who the target like beneficiary is and like how the project is going about their service. So I think that's really cool.
Very cool. Thank you. Any other comments?
But Susan was not expecting such great
Yeah.
feedback.
Good job, Susan.
Yes.
Send it to Food for Peace.
So I wanted to show you USAID's new platform exposure, getting to the point about text with photos. So this is a new platform we've been using last 6 months to a year, I think. This is one that was just launched yesterday, actually, this week. And the medium is primarily photos. So you'll see, I'll just scroll through and then I'll go back. So you'll see there's a lot of photos attached with this story, but it's primarily photo-based as opposed to text-based. But what I think is nice about this, if you're doing some sort of storytelling format like this, is having not only the photos, but also having these nice kind of pop-outs of text to accompany it as well. So that's one option, and then keeping the text accompanying the photos short and sweet, but also making sure that it actually does tell what's happening in the photo if the photo is not totally clear. So this one in particular is, so USAID just launched a communications campaign yesterday, soft launch, called Humanity Acts. So if you go on the main USAID page and you'll see it on the rotating slideshow at the top, so just click on that one and then you'll see this and a bunch of other stories related to the Syria crisis. So this is kind of one platform. So I would take a look at this and just use this as an example. I would also say for text, so we have a Flickr page for Food for Peace, and we generally try to put in a good paragraph description with each of our photos that we post on Flickr so that people have the context of what the photo is about. The photo can tell part of the story, but it doesn't tell you, what the country is and, what we're hoping to achieve or have achieved related to that specific photo. So we do try to put just a little bit of a descriptor on Flickr. Flickr, you have the option, or other photo posting sites, you do have that option to put in a good caption with it as well. So, so that's one thing that we try to do with our Flickr page. And I think, going to your point of making sure that it's compelling information, that it's not just, okay, X, Y, and Z about a program, but maybe talking more about the impact and what the photo means as opposed to just the stats. So those are two things that I thought about for that particular question.
Any tips on titling your photos? I think it was the previous communications person before you, Rachel, but somebody wanted us to turn in all our photos from our trips and put a title on every one, and we all went, okay, I'm not taking any more pictures.
I mean, it's helpful though. It's one of those things where it is time consuming. I mean, ideally what you're doing when you go into a photo is, let's see if I can do it by pulling up this image. You can do it under properties. If it'll let me. So when you right click on your photo and go under properties, you should be able to add in some sort of details. Yes. So, okay. So under the details slide, you can type in a title and whatnot and a description, and it'll embed within your photograph. And ideally, when you're taking photographs, you're doing this with the photographs you're taking, and what that does is help to capture that background of what you actually took the photo, what's in the photograph, where did you take it, who are these people, what are they doing, what is the context?
It's a paragraph. I mean, I don't know.
Sure.
I really am stumped.
Yeah, so what I've generally done, because we get, for Food for Peace, we have 85 staff members who go out, for a good chunk of them travel pretty regularly. So what I've asked for is at least at the bare minimum changing actually the photo's name to put in a tiny bit of a descriptor like irrigation canal, Madagascar, and then their last name so I know who took it, so that historically when we're moving forward and that person is long gone from Food for Peace, that we have some sort of identifier to go back and say, oh, well, I can dig into more. I see when this photo was taken year-wise. I can look and see what the program was so I can add more of a descriptor. So for Food for Peace, that's one thing that I do, and that's an easier ask than trying to get people to write a whole title. Because, yeah, it is a lot. The other thing I would say is sit down with your communications person if you are not the communications person, or if you are sitting down with your colleagues who are giving you photos, and just take that half an hour and quickly type in some descriptions and titles.
Rwanda and then last name of the photographer.
Yeah. And a date, yeah.
Well, the other thing you said was delete all the photos you don't use. So like on the plane ride back, I'm automatically just going through and culling as much as possible so I don't have to title or describe them.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. Any more questions? Yeah.
I've been working on the communication design rather than taking the photos myself. And I do want to caution against deleting too much, because I think that some of the photos that I see that I think are really interesting for projects, maybe the first executive is like, oh, that's just a normal market.
Right.
But for an assignment that's about food security, markets are really, really useful. So it's great to delete things, but I feel like if we're over-deleting on right away, it might make it more difficult for the communications team here.
Sure. And so maybe, more like delete things that are blurry, delete photos that you just didn't get anything but a random tree.
Or you took 10 of virtually the same thing and you picked just the top 2 best looking ones of that, yeah.
Great, thank you. Sorry, go ahead. Either way.
I was going to say, it's also about how you store them. Like some people just throw everything from their TDY into one folder. But if you took 50 pictures and one clinic or one site or one farm, it's a lot easier to throw those 50 into a folder that gives a descriptor.
Sure. Yeah.
Than just having them all in one big jumble.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Agreed.
Or even create just a Word document in that folder that just lists 1 through 10, this place, 20 in this place, and just make sure that it's in the same location. That would be pretty helpful for Chris's. Some people are trying to put all the information in the title, and it just is
Just a really long title, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Joan,
you had a comment?
Yeah, basically similar to that, doing your best pictures. You have a laundry list and you have the best photos of it. You can go in and automatically there's 7 or so that people just kind of pull and they're going through all of them.
Yeah, the other thing too, which I've found helpful from some colleagues is, this is for the more tech-savvy colleagues of mine than others, is they automatically just post their photos to Picasa or Flickr or one of the photo sharing websites. And then I have the opportunity to kind of look through and see which photos might be usable for us, and then I go back to that person and say, okay, these 20 or 30 photos I think would be really useful for us to use. Can you give me a little bit more information and context so that we can use these for future publications or whatever? That'd be another thought too.
Great. Anything online? Okay.
So we did want to give you just a few final tips on photo editing. I know there's a lot of different photo editing software out there, but there's a couple common things that I think even just a little bit changing your photos will make a better photo. So for one, red eye function. I'm sure you've all seen the red eye photos. Most photo editing software, even the basics, have red eye, the ability to get rid of red eye, so I would suggest doing that. Cropping is not always the solution, but For example, you may have like someone's elbow inadvertently sticking into the photo that you didn't see when you initially took the photo or when you were looking at it on your tiny viewfinder on your camera. So cropping is also an option. Just make sure when you're cropping that you're not reducing the photo size as well. Because typically, so for USAID purposes, we always require the high-res version of a file in order for it to be usable on our website or in publications. So keep that in mind if you're cropping. There's also typically functions across all photo editing softwares for color correction or what some might call saturation of the colors. So look for that as an option because that can just give your colors just a little bit of a boost. So for example, if you're, high noon, super bright sunlight, and things are looking washed out, the saturation can help a little bit with that as well. And then the last thing, which is a little bit more advanced, but a lot of photo editing softwares has this, is a spot corrector. And I've discovered a spot on my lens that I can't clean off. So all my photos from Jordan, I was going through it using the spot corrector, but it's a really simple tool once you've learned how to use it, and it's awesome. So it basically just selects a piece of like where you have the spot, it'll select a similar spot. So if it's blue sky, I had a black dot on the blue sky, it took another section of blue sky and basically corrected where I had the black dot. And you wouldn't even know that it was corrected. That is something that I also have used. So we had one partner working inside Syria who wanted parts of the sides of their food boxes blurred out. So there is also functions for blurring or spot correcting so it looks like just the rest of the box as opposed to showing this identifier which might identify their project. So that was something that we also used. That's where creative cropping also helps. So those are just a couple of tips. And then when we were playing with the iPhones, the HDR function on your phone cameras is a great one if you're not sure what exposure you're going to need for the photos you're taking.
And I just want to say too that even if you don't have access to like really specific software for photo editing, oftentimes if you're just putting something like in a Word document or pulling up the photograph on your computer, there are automatically built in most computers have like just a very simple software to do things like red eye and change the brightness, and sometimes just changing the brightness will make a difference even if it's not perfect, it just helps. So don't be afraid to play around with the functions you already have if you don't have access to the software. Yeah.
Yeah, any Microsoft program, Publisher, PowerPoint, Word, actually has more editing functions with photos than you think. You can change a lot of the color and the contrast and stuff. Okay.
Great. Any other questions or anything?
Any last questions, and then we'll wrap up? Yeah.
Is there a photo correction app on a MacBook? Do you suggest that it's easy to use?
So I have a Mac at home, and that's what I use for photo editing. So for a long time, I was just using the built-in iPhoto software. Adobe Lightroom is not too expensive, and it's very user-friendly. I had never used it before and decided to try to do this spot correction for my Jordan photos, and it was really easy to pick up how to use it. So you can just download that from the Adobe website.
And if you have access to the web, explore CIXLR.com.
Yeah, there are a lot of open source free softwares out there too.
Any other questions, comments? No? Wonderful.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for coming. Really.
We do have a feedback form if you want to take just a few minutes to fill this out. We'd appreciate it so we can continue to improve trainings like this.
And I will apologize, in the grid in the back, I accidentally left something about value chains, but just imagine it's photography, and answer the question as if it's photography.
Did everyone get the tips sheet? Just make sure. Okay.
And for everyone here and also online, we do encourage people to submit their photos.
Thank you.
Yeah. With your newfound skills now to news@fsnnetwork.org to be featured on our biweekly FSN newsletter. That would be great. And one last thing, we will have a follow-up email that will have the recording and the presentation notes and the handouts as well. So just in case if you missed anything, we'll have
to share it.
Yeah.
Could the photograph of the mom and baby be included in that follow-up?
Provided that's
Yeah,
okay
we
with you.
can ask you that, yeah. Thank you.
So,
Thank you. Should we hang up the phone?
should we hang up the phone?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks everyone on the phone.
The leader has disconnected. The conference will be terminated in 5 minutes.